The second I spotted those bulldozers tearing up my lakefront lawn, my heart sank. Was this a mix-up? A wrong address? Maybe a city crew gone rogue? But then I saw her, Karen Hastings, HOA president, perched in my Adirondack chair like a queen, sipping iced tea beside her grown daughter, Madison. They were lounging on my deck, acting like they owned the place. My blood boiled. Karen leaned toward Madison, her voice carrying over the hum of machinery. "You're gonna love this view, honey. I always knew this cabin was perfect for you." I stood frozen at the edge of the gravel driveway, my fishing gear still stacked. By the porch, my mail untouched inside, my dog's water bowl glinting in the sun. Yet there they were, erasing me from my own home. I took a deep breath and marched forward. "Excuse me, what the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Karen didn't even blink. She flashed a smug grin and said, "Oh, Greg, didn't you get the notice? This lot's been reclassified as an HOA green zone. Madison's the new occupant. It's all above board." I stared, dumbfounded. "Above board? You gave my lake cabin to your daughter." She shrugged, cool as ice. "The board voted. We had quorum." "You really should have shown up to the last few meetings." Madison chimed in with a mocking little wave, like I was some delivery guy. "I'm already picking out curtains, Greg. Hope you don't mind lilac." My fists clenched, but I didn't yell or lose it, not yet. Rage simmered, but I held it together, knowing this wasn't over. Which city in the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with an HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Just turned around, walked back to my truck, and made one silent promise. I was going to fence it, not just the cabin, but the entire property line, right up to their company's headquarters next door, and I had every right to. But before I could act, before I could even get a plan together, something even more shocking happened. Before I take you there, let me tell you how this all started, because this wasn't just about a cabin. It was about trust, about betrayal, about standing your ground when the whole world gaslights you into thinking you're crazy. But first, where are you watching from? I love hearing where folks tune in from. Drop it in the comments. This story happened right here in the US, a small town in northern Michigan where everyone knows each other and the HOA is tighter than a jar lid in winter. Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Greg Parker. I'm a 52-year-old contractor. I work with my hands. I like things simple. Fishing on weekends, walking my dog, Rascal, and fixing up my late father's lake cabin, which he built with his own hands in 1963. Karen Hastings, the president of the Shoreline Woods HOA. She's the kind of woman who treats HOA bylaws like they're scripture and thinks anyone not wearing a scarf to a board meeting is a threat to the community aesthetic. She lives 2 streets down in a modern brick house that she constantly brags has custom Italian tile. No one asked Karen. Her daughter Madison, she's 27, works at her mom's landscaping company, and drives a white Jeep with pink eyelashes on the headlights. She's the human version of a wine glass that says, "But first, brunch. We used to be friendly, you know, years ago." Karen would wave at me from her porch. She even once complimented my hydrangeas. But all that changed when the HOA discovered that technically my cabin didn't fall under their jurisdiction when the area was first incorporated. It was grandfathered in. I didn't have to pay dues. I didn't follow their trash can schedules. I didn't even have to get paint color approval. And Karen, she hated that it itched her more than a mosquito in August. So, for the past 2 years, she'd been doing little things, complaining that my dog barked too loudly, filing noise reports when I used my table saw during the day, suggesting at public meetings that all property should be reevaluated for fairness. I thought it was just petty drama. I never imagined she'd go as far as stealing my property through a shady rezoning trick. But here we were, and it didn't stop at just showing up and claiming the cabin. 2 days after that awful encounter, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA legal team. It said my property had been absorbed into the Shoreline Greenway, a so-called beautification initiative that allowed temporary residential assignment for community members who qualified. Guess who qualified? Madison. It said I had 72 hours to remove any remaining personal items. The cabin my father built by hand. The place I'd been visiting since I was 5. Gone like a stolen wallet. I started driving out to the lake at dawn, parking across the road and watching for my truck. Madison had already brought in an interior designer. I saw furniture trucks arriving. I even saw them toss my old canoe into a dumpster. I wanted to scream, but instead I called someone. My cousin Jake, he's a surveyor. Meet me tomorrow. Bring the original boundary records, I said. Jake chuckled. Finally going to shut down Queen Karen. Worse, I said. I'm about to give her a new backyard view, chain link and all. See, what Karen didn't realize was that while the cabin sat on the lakefront, the property stretched far back, way beyond what, she thought, and right behind it, her company's warehouse, the one she used to store her fleet of gardening trucks. Right now, they had free access from the rear road, but not for long. Jake met me at sunrise. We spent hours walking the full border with stakes, orange tape, and the old 1960s deed. And there it was, clear as daylight. I owned a long strip of land that ran like a finger right to the side of Karen's business. Legally, I could fence the entire thing. No easement, no access, no negotiation. I went down to the city planning office, filed my intent to build, and walked out with a signed permit. The clerk raised an eyebrow and said, "This fencing job, it runs right to Hastings Garden Camera, you know." I smiled. "Yep, it sure does." But the very next morning, before I could even start the build, I found my cabin door ripped clean off its hinges. The inside was trashed. My father's old rifle gone, family photos shredded. A smell of spray paint hung in the air, and right there, scrolled across the cabin wall in pink letters, "Stay away. This isn't yours anymore." I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the wall like it might erase itself. "Stay away. This isn't yours anymore." Pink paint dripping like blood from the word yours. My dog Rascal whimpered beside me. He hadn't stepped foot in the cabin since Karen and her daughter barged in. But now even he didn't want to go past the door. I walked through the mess slowly like I was wading through someone else's nightmare. My dad's workbench smashed, the handmade stools he carved from driftwood gone, and the old photo of him holding a trout with me grinning beside him torn clean down the middle. My gut twisted. This wasn't just vandalism. This was personal, but instead of calling the police right away, I walked back outside. I needed air. I needed to think. Across the lawn, Madison's white Jeep sat parked, engine still warm. I noticed a designer tote bag tossed on the front seat. And wait, was that a paint can in the back? Before I could take a step toward it, Karen herself appeared on the gravel path, wearing her signature wide-brimmed hat and fake smile. "Good morning, Greg. Something wrong?" she asked sweetly, holding a glass of green juice like we were neighbors chatting over gardenias. "You broke into my cabin," I said. "Or your daughter did." "I'm calling the sheriff." Karen let out a fake laugh. "Oh, Greg, let's not be dramatic. The HOA has reassigned the space. You're just lingering. Honestly, I think it's best if you let go of the past. It's not healthy." She gestured toward the broken door with her smoothie cup. "Besides," she added, lowering her voice, "it's your word against ours. No cameras, no witnesses, and frankly, you haven't exactly been popular at the meetings." I looked her dead in the eyes. "You think you're untouchable?" Karen smirked. "No, Greg. I know I am." That's when it hit me. They didn't just want the cabin. They wanted me gone, erased, like I never existed. But what Karen didn't realize is you don't mess with a man who spent his life building things, because we know how to rebuild, we know how to dig deep, We know how to plan. And most importantly, we document everything. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Her face twisted immediately. You're trespassing, she barked. No, Karen, I said calmly. I'm standing on land that legally belongs to me, and this conversation thus became evidence. She stormed off toward her jeep, but not before hissing, You'll regret this. I doubted Karen. Back in town, I met with Sheriff Tate, a friend of my father's. He examined the footage and the permit documents I brought. You have every right to fence your land, he said. As for the vandalism, if we can prove it was them, it's a felony. I nodded. They left fingerprints. Sheriff Tate raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Karen never expected a working man to be smart enough to call a surveyor, file legal documents, and keep his cool. Nope, I said. She underestimated the wrong man. He patted my shoulder. File the report, but in the meantime, build your fence. And I did. The next morning, I hired a crew. Not just any crew. My guys, the ones I've worked with for years on renovation projects across town. Honest men, fast hands, big drills. We started at 6 a.m. By 9 o'clock, we had 20 steel posts in the ground. By noon, Rascal had his own fenced-off patch of land with a bull, a bed, and a sign that read, This is still my home. Karen came screeching up in her Lexus around 100 p.m., shrieking the moment she saw the backstretch of the fence lining up with the driveway to her landscaping warehouse. What is the meaning of this? It's a fence, I said, tapping one of the steel posts on my land with a permit. You're cutting off my company's access road. Correction, I replied, showing her a printed map. I'm cutting off your illegal use of my land. She stared at the document like it was in ancient Greek. This will ruin our logistics, she hissed. You're interfering with a local business. Your daughter interfered with my life, I said. You call that fair? She started shouting about the HOA, about legal action, about how no one will believe you over me. So, I held up my phone again. Smile. She slapped it out of my hand, which was a big mistake because the sheriff's deputy saw the whole thing from across the road. Karen was given a verbal warning for harassment and physical aggression. Her face turned the color of expired yogurt, and I didn't stop the fence. In fact, I made it taller. By the third day, a full metal barrier stretched from the lakefront to the warehouse backlot. Karen's trucks couldn't get through. They had to reroute around the public road, which meant delays, extra gas costs, and furious clients. She begged Emmy to reconsider for the sake of business harmony. I told her I'd reconsider when she handed back my keys and signed a public apology. Instead, they escalated. I got a notice pinned to my truck windshield, not from the police, but from the HOA. It read, effective immediately. Greg Parker is hereby banned from participating in community events using its spaces or accessing HOA-maintained facilities to violations against communal spirit and harmony. Below that was a second note in pink ink. You'll be gone by summer. Trust me. I don't know what they planned next, but I knew it wouldn't be legal. So, I did what any smart man would do. I called a lawyer. But before I could meet him, a loud crash echoed from the lake. I rushed outside, and there, floating in the water, half sunk and burning at the edges, was my father's canoe. I stood there, on the dock, frozen. Flames licked the edges of the old canoe. Black smoke coiled into the blue Michigan sky. The same canoe my dad carved with his bare hands, the one we used to paddle across the lake every 4th of July, was now sinking and burning. I felt something in my chest tear open. Rascal barked from the porch, pacing nervously, picking up on my rage. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I just stood there, jaw clenched, watching it vanish beneath the ripples. They were trying to break me, but they didn't know what that canoe meant. That boat wasn't just wood and resin. It was the last piece of my father I still touched, the last thing I hadn't put in a box, and now it was gone. I walked slowly back up the gravel path to the cabin. Not a single soul around, but I knew who did it. There were no cameras, no witnesses, but I didn't need them because I had a pattern. And the next part of my plan didn't need permission. I called my lawyer, Davis Clean, the kind of man who didn't flinch when you said HOA sabotage or land theft. After I explained everything, Davis said, "We're not just dealing with a petty HOA president. This is coordinated abuse of private property. Good news, you're not powerless." I leaned in. "Tell me what I can do." He walked me through it. A restraining order against Madison, a civil suit against Karen and the HOA board for overreach, a notice of intent to sue for damages. But then Davis asked, "Have you considered the land value behind their warehouse?" I blinked. "What about it?" He chuckled. "Karen's company is just using your land. They've built part of their back lot on it. That little tool shed, those mulch pallets stacked in the corner, you own that land." It hit me like a freight train. Not only had they tried to steal from me, they were squatting on my property. Davis continued, "We'll hit them with a notice of encroachment, then a cease and desist, and if they don't comply, we sue. Or better yet, we build." I raised my eyebrows. "Build what?" "Whatever you want," Davis said. "A fence, a garden, a shack, a giant billboard that says, 'Get off my land.'" "It's yours." A slow grin spread across my face. And right then and there, I made a decision. I was going to build a metal shed right up against their back office wall, big, tall, and painted jet black with motion lights, solar-powered flood lamps, and security cameras, and on this side a giant white sign that read "Private property trespassers will be prosecuted ho not recognized." It took me 3 days. My crew brought in materials at night so Karen wouldn't see it coming. The foundation went up on day 1, steel, panels by day 2. On the 3rd morning, Karen and Madison arrived to a 10 ft wall blocking their access, their mulch deliveries, and their view. She ran over, hair a mess, screaming, "What is this monstrosity? You're ruining our business." I leaned on a shovel covered in dust and said, "Correction. I'm building on my land. You have no right." "Oh, I have all the rights." I cut in, waving the land survey and stamped permit in her face. "This is just the beginning." She stomped off to her Jeep and peeled away. That night, someone egged my truck. Rascal barked at the front door all night. I sat in my cabin with a baseball bat across my knees. The war had begun, but I didn't just want revenge. I wanted exposure. So, I went online. I posted in our town's community forum. I shared the story, photos of the cabin before and after, the wall of my father's canoe, the ridiculous letter Karen left banning me from shared spaces. I titled the post, "Ho President gave my lake cabin to her daughter." So I built a fence straight to her business. It exploded. Within hours, hundreds of comments rolled in. "This is insane. You should go public. That HOA is a cult. Karen sounds like a villain from a Hallmark movie. We need a GoFund to build you a bigger fence." Some people even recognized Karen. A few former employees of her company chimed in saying they left because of unfair practices and favoritism. And then something strange happened. I got a message. It was from a woman named June Wilkins. She used to serve on the HOA board. She asked to meet. I agreed. We sat at a little diner by the marina. She was in her late 60s with short gray curls and a tote bag full of paperwork. "I've been watching what they're doing to you," she said, stirring her coffee. "It's not just unethical, it's illegal." She slid over a folder. Meeting minutes from last year, emails between board members. Karen's daughter never applied for housing assistance or temporary residency. They faked the paperwork. My hands trembled as I flipped through it. "This is fraud." June nodded. "And if you take this to the county board, Karen will be forced to step down." I looked up, stunned. "But why now?" She smiled. "Because I built this neighborhood with my husband 40 years ago. We were the first on the lake, and I'm tired of watching it get poisoned." I took the file and thanked her. Rascal wagged his tail at her like he knew she was on our side. But just as I walked out of the diner, phone buzzing with alerts, a car screeched across the parking lot and skidded to a stop near my feet. It was Madison. She jumped out red in the face, screaming, "You think you're winning? My mom is going to sue you into the ground." And then she did something I didn't expect. She threw a rock at my windshield. Glass exploded across the pavement, and that was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to bury them. The sound of shattered glass echoed across the parking lot. People inside the diner turned toward the window, mouths open, coffee mugs frozen midair. Madison stood there, chest heaving, eyes wild like she didn't even realize what she had just done. I stood still, calm, too calm, actually. She screamed again, "You think this is over? You'll regret ever messing with my mom." I didn't respond. Instead, I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I'd already been recording for the last 5 minutes. Madison's voice, the threats, the rock, the impact, all of it was on tape. I raised the phone, flipped the screen toward her. "You just committed a crime in public, in front of cameras, in front of witnesses." Her face palled like someone pulled the soul out of her body. She stammered, "I didn't mean." But before she could finish, the sheriff's deputy, who happened to be sitting in his cruiser across the street, yes, that lucky, flipped on his lights and drove across the lot. Madison tried to flee. Too late. "Mum, step away from the asterisk vehicle and place your hands where I can see them." She went pale. "You can't arrest me. My mom is the HOA president." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Exactly why we're going to do this by the book." 10 minutes later, she was in the back of the cruiser. That day, everything changed. Word spread fast. I mean, fast. By sunset, nearly every house in the community knew what happened, and for the first time in years, people started standing up to Karen. I got calls from 3 neighbors, ones I hadn't talked to in months, saying, "Greg, I'm sorry. We didn't know it had gotten this bad. What can we do?" But while the town was buzzing, I was in the zone. I took June's folder straight to Davis, my lawyer. He flipped through every email, every phony vote document, every approval Madison supposedly got. "This is airtight," Davis said. "With this, we can file a formal complaint with the County Housing Board, Civil Court, and the State HOA Licensing Office. If you're up for it, we can take it all the way." I nodded. I wasn't just up for it. I was ready. We filed the paperwork, and then I waited. But Karen, oh, she didn't wait. She doubled down. A week after Madison's arrest, I got served a cease and desist from Karen's personal lawyer. Claimed I was harassing her family, causing distress, interfering with community peace. It would have been funny if it wasn't so crooked. I called Davis. "Don't worry," he said. "They're panicking." That's what people like Karen do when control slips through their fingers. But she made a fatal mistake. She left fingerprints. The county board scheduled a formal hearing. We were going to present our case: the illegal land grab, the manipulation of HOA votes, the fraud. I had evidence, photos, documents, witnesses. But the day before the hearing, something unexpected happened. I came home to find a huge box sitting on my porch. No return label. No writing. I opened it. Inside was everything they stole from my cabin. My dad's fishing hat. The missing family photos. Some creased but intact. Even the small wooden plaque that used to hang by the front door. Parker Place, since '63, and tucked between it all, a note handwritten. "Greg, I didn't know what my mom had done. I didn't understand the full story until after I got arrested. She told me she was correcting a zoning error. She said the cabin was abandoned. I believed her. I'm sorry. This doesn't fix anything, but I thought you should have these back, Madison." I read the letter twice, then I sat down. I wasn't sure how to feel. A small part of me deep down wanted to believe her. Maybe she really didn't know how bad it was. Maybe she was just a spoiled adult who had always trusted her mother. But another part of me, the one that watched his father's canoe burn, said this wasn't forgiveness time. This was reckoning time. The next day, I walked into the county hearing, with Davis beside me, a binder full of evidence, and June sitting in the back like a silent guardian. Karen was already there, dressed in pearls, fake tears in her eyes, playing the victim. She stood up, voice trembling, saying, "This man has targeted me and my family. He's built hostile structures, spread lies, and bullied a young woman into the hospital with stress." The panel listened quietly, and then it was my turn. I didn't yell. I didn't try to win anyone over with speeches. I just laid it out one piece at a time. The survey that proved my land ownership, the permit showing I had legal right to build, the documents showing Madison's approval form was backdated, the emails that proved Karen coordinated the vote herself with only the members present, one of whom was her brother, and finally, the video of Madison destroying my windshield. When I finished, the room was silent. Then one of the board members leaned forward. "Mrs. Hastings, can you explain this?" Karen stammered, shuffled her papers, eyes darting like a cornered raccoon. "I was just following community protocol, the Green Space Initiative." The board cut her off. "Ma'am, you're suspended from the HOA presidency effective immediately pending full investigation." She gasped, "You can't do that." "Oh, we can," the chairman replied. "And if what we're seeing is accurate, you're facing civil liability, possibly criminal." She stood up and stormed out of the room, knocking over her chair. The room stayed quiet, and I just sat there, heart pounding, not from anger, but from relief. It was finally turning. After months of gaslighting, after being painted as the bad guy, after losing sleep and memories, and the last piece of my dad's legacy, people were starting to see. But it wasn't over yet, because just as I got back to my truck, rascal hopping inside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A fresh notice taped to my door, not from the HOA, from the city's zoning office. It read, "Notice of emergency rezoning petition filed. Subject property pending hearing for commercial reallocation." Below it, the name of the person who filed it, Karen Hastings. She was trying again, this time to declare my land commercial and force a public sale. I stared at the notice taped to my front door like it was a death threat. Notice of emergency rezoning petition filed. Subject property pending hearing for commercial reallocation filed by Karen Hastings. It felt like a punch to the stomach. She'd just been suspended by the County Housing Board, publicly humiliated, and practically booed out of the hearing. But somehow she still had one more trick up her sleeve. This wasn't just pettiness anymore. This was war. The zoning petition meant if the city approved her request, they could classify my land a utility-adjacent commercial space. Thanks to the proximity of her company's warehouse that would allow the city to buy my land for pennies, force an eminent domain clause, and redevelop it for public commercial use. Basically, she was trying to steal my land again legally this time. I sat on the porch steps, rascal beside me, holding the paper with shaking hands. For the first time since this madness started, I felt something close to hopelessness. Was this ever going to end? That's when June Wilkins drove up. She didn't say a word, just handed me a thermos of hot coffee and sat down beside me like an old friend who could feel your soul aching without having to ask why. She filed the rationing, didn't she? June asked quietly. I nodded. She's been talking about it for months, said it was her final lever. She's got a few friends on the city planning committee, people who owe her favors. I looked at her. What do I do now? June sipped her coffee. You show them the favor's been repaid, and then you take everything she used and turn it into a sword. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I made calls. First to Davis, who confirmed the petition had been filed, but not yet heard. We had 2 weeks before the city council would hold a public session on it, 2 weeks to prove it was a sham. Then I called neighbors, one by one. Old friends, new allies, even people I hadn't spoken to in a decade. I told them everything. I showed them the documents, the videos, the threats. I showed them the canoe photo, waterlogged and burned. I said, "You don't have to like me, but if she gets away with this, none of you are safe. Your land could be next," and slowly, they rallied. We organized a petition of our own, a counter-petition signed by nearly 60 property owners demanding the city deny the reason zoning application on the basis of HOA corruption and community fraud. Then I met with a local reporter, Sandra Beach, from Channel 9 News. She heard the whole story. Karen's fake votes, the false documents, Madison's arrest, the illegal fencing notice, the canoe. She shook her head, scribbling notes. "This isn't just a HOA dispute. This is a cover-up. Let me run this." I agreed. The next evening, Channel 9 ran a segment titled HOA President Accused of Land Grab. Is this Michigan's pettiest power play? They aired footage of Madison throwing the rock, my fence construction, Karen storming out of the hearing, and the burned canoe. The internet exploded. The comments section was brutal. "She's a crook and pearls. Give Greg his cabin back. I'm going to build a fence just for Greg." Karen stayed quiet for about 48 hours. Then she showed up on a rival station trying to clear her name. She said, "I've always acted in the interest of the community. Mr. Parker is a man who resists cooperation and creates division." That backfired because within minutes more neighbors started coming forward. Folks who'd had their garden sheds moved, their mailboxes inspected, their dogs written up in HOA warnings. She'd done this before. I compiled all of it. By the time the zoning meeting arrived, the city council chamber was packed. Dozens of people lined the walls. Many wore shirts that said, "Hands off Parker Place." Karen walked in wearing a navy blazer and sunglasses, acting like this was a coronation. The hearing began. Her lawyer, a stiff guy in a gray suit, argued that reason zoning was necessary due to accessibility needs and community growth. Then it was my turn. I didn't come alone. I had Davis, I had June, I had the Channel 9 reporter, and I had every document, every witness, and every signed petition. I walked up to the microphone, cleared my throat, and said, "My name is Greg Parker. My father built that cabin in 1963. He fought in Korea. He came back and put his sweat into that place with his bare hands. I don't care what they say about zoning or landscaping or business growth. That land is mine. It's my legacy, and it's not for sale. Not for negotiation. Not for anyone's daughter. And if you approve this reason zoning, you're saying corruption wins. You're saying lying on paperwork, intimidating citizens, and torching history is acceptable. So I ask, are you really okay with that?" The room was silent. Then the chairman spoke. "This petition is denied." The crowd clapped. Karen stood up shouting, "You're ruining everything. This whole neighborhood will fall apart." But no one listened. Her voice, once so loud, was drowned out by applause. That night, I sat on my porch again. This time, with Rascal asleep at my feet and a cold drink in my hand, I thought it was finally over. But the next morning, something happened that shook me worse than the canoe. As I opened the gate to my fenced property, I saw a figure waiting by the cabin steps. It was Madison. She was crying. In her hand was a manila envelope. She said, "I need to tell you something. Something I found in my mom's safe. It's about your father's land deed." Madison stood there like a ghost from a memory hadn't made yet, nervous, readied, holding that manila envelope like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She looked different. No makeup, no attitude, no designer sunglasses. Just a plain hoodie, faded jeans, and trembling fingers. Rascal let out a low growl from behind me, unsure whether to trust her. I wasn't sure either. "What do you want?" I asked. She held the envelope tighter to fix what I helped ruin. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside and led her onto the porch. We sat at opposite ends of the old swing my father built, the wood creaking beneath us like it remembered better days. "I know it doesn't matter now," she said, eyes focused on the floorboards. "But I didn't know everything. I didn't know what my mom was doing, how deep it went. Not until I got arrested and started looking through her files." She pushed the envelope toward me. "What is it?" I asked, not touching it yet. "Your father's original deed, and another document, one I'd never seen before." I opened the envelope. Slowly, inside was the deed I'd already seen, dated 1963, but attached to it was something shocking. An amendment signed by my father in 1979 giving conditional protective status to the land under a legacy clause. I blinked. "This says the land can't be transferred, rationed, or annexed by any governing body without the heir's full consent." Madison nodded. "She found it years ago, hid it, buried it in a folder marked non-relevant." My mouth went dry. "She always knew she couldn't legally take your land," Madison whispered. "But she thought if she created enough confusion, enough false votes and noise, you'd eventually give up." I stood up and walked to the railing. Everything I'd been fighting for, the fence, the court case, the cabin, it was already protected. My dad had thought ahead. Karen knew that. And still, she came for me. I turned back to Madison. "Why are you really giving this to me?" "Because I'm tired of pretending," she said. "I was raised to believe my mom was a hero, that rules were suggestions, that appearances meant more than truth." She looked up at me, eyes swollen but steady. "I want to help fix this, whatever that means." We sat in silence for a while. Eventually, she left quietly. No dramatic exit, no sarcastic smirk, just a broken apology trailing behind her like a forgotten scarf. That night, I met Davis at his office and laid the document on his desk. He stared at it for a long time. "This changes everything," he whispered. "Greg, this document makes the entire HOA campaign against you legally void. Every vote, every zoning request, every letter, they all violated this clause." He leaned back, eyes wide. "We can file a retroactive injunction and push for full asset forfeit. If we do this, we don't just shut her down. We strip her." I was quiet. "Greg," he said, leaning forward, "are you sure you want to go through with this? It'll be messy, loud, public. Her reputation will be gone." I stared out the window for a long time, and then I said yes, but not because I wanted revenge anymore, because I wanted restoration. I wanted to make sure no one else, no quiet neighbor or lonely old man, would ever be steamrolled by a crooked HOA again. The next morning, Davis filed the injunction. 2 days later, the sheriff's department arrived at Hastings Garden Co. with papers. Karen wasn't there, but the staff stood out front shocked as officials moved through the warehouse, tagging everything that stood on my land. Mulch pallets, storage trailers, gardening machines. By noon, Karen stormed onto the scene. "What the hell is going on?" she shouted, heels kicking up gravel. An officer handed her the paperwork. "You've been served. The land under this portion of your warehouse is not yours. And according to this injunction, filed by Mr. Parker, you're in violation of legacy clause protections. This entire operation is now under review." She went pale. "You're making a mistake," she said, trembling. "No," I said, stepping forward from the sidewalk. "You did. I built this neighborhood," she screamed. "I made it what it is." I nodded slowly. "And now it's time for it to belong to everyone, not just you." She stared at me, eyes glassy, jaw clenched. And then, in a moment I'll never forget, Karen Hastings did something no one expected. She collapsed, not fainted, just crumbled. Like all the weight she carried finally crushed her from the inside. Staff rushed over. Paramedics were called. She was escorted into an ambulance, not with cuffs, but with silence. I didn't feel victory. I felt closure. A few weeks passed. The injunction held. The city denied every further attempt by Karen to retaliate. Her company took a massive hit. Several clients pulled out after the story ran again, this time nationally. As for me, I rebuilt not just the cabin, but the legacy, the spirit of what my father left behind. I put up a new mailbox with carved lettering, Parker Legacy Grounds. I painted the porch again, replaced the canoe, and then I did something bold. I invited the entire community to a picnic. No HOA approval needed. I grilled hot dogs, put out lawn chairs, let kids fish off the dock. I even let Madison come quietly off to the side, helping serve lemonade. People smiled again, laughed again. Someone even brought a sign that said, "No Karen Zone." We all laughed, not in cruelty, in freedom. That night, as the sun set over the lake, Rascal curled beside me on the porch and I looked out at the water. I thought about my dad, about the way he used to hum when he worked, about the way he told me, "Son, if you stand for what's right, even when it costs you everything, you still win." He was right. Because I didn't just get my cabin back. I got myself back. Summer melted into early fall, and with it came a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Leaves began to turn along the lake's edge, reds and golds reflecting on still water like fire caught in glass. The new fence stood strong, glinting in the sunrise, not as a wall of division anymore, but as a line in the sand that said, "You don't get to take what doesn't belong to you." The neighborhood was different now, lighter, free. You could feel it in the air. HOA board meetings actually opened with smiles instead of snide glances. Neighbors who'd never spoken were now organizing potlucks. The new interim HOA president, Mr. Howard, an ex-Marine with a calm voice and a strict moral compass, made it clear that the HOA served the people, not the other way around, and Karen Hastings. After the public legal losses, the resonating scandal, and Madison's very public apology at the city hearing, Karen vanished. She quietly sold her house. Rumor was she moved in with her sister downstate somewhere quiet, somewhere no one knew her name or her history. No one saw her again. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Truth had done its job. But just when I thought the dust had finally settled, I received one last letter in the mail. It had no return address, just my name on the envelope. I opened it on the porch, Rascal at my feet, a steaming mug of black coffee in my hand. The handwriting was neat. "Greg, I don't expect forgiveness, but I do owe you honesty. There's one thing I never told anyone, not even Madison. Your father and I were friends, close friends. In the early days of the HOA, before I married, before I changed my name to Hastings, I worked as a junior property clerk. He used to bring you into town on Saturdays for groceries. We'd talk. He told me he wanted to protect the land, that he didn't trust the HOA to remain fair over time. He saw the hunger even then, that's why he added the legacy clause. I helped him notarize it. I never should have buried it. I thought I was building something bigger. I didn't realize I was destroying what mattered most. You were never the outsider. You were the only one who belonged. I'm sorry, Karen. I sat with that letter for a long time. I don't know if she meant every word, but I know part of her remembered who she used to be, and that was enough for me to finally breathe again. In the months that followed, I did more than repair what was lost. I restored what had been forgotten. I turned the back half of the property, the part that used to be an access road for Karen's warehouse, into a community garden. We called it Parker Patch. Kids planted pumpkins and sunflowers. Neighbors left painted stones in the soil with messages like "Grow strong and this land stands for truth." Madison helped quietly. She didn't ask for credit. She didn't even speak much, but she showed up every weekend, brought lemonade, dug in the dirt, built a small bench beside a tree she planted herself. It was a fig tree. She named it Second Chance. The Channel 9 reporter, Sandra Beach, came back one last time to do a follow-up story. She stood on the dock, mic in hand, wind blowing through her hair, and asked me, Greg, after everything that happened, would you do it all again? I looked across the lake, thought about my dad, the canoe, the fence, the neighbors, the letter, and then I smiled. Yeah, I said. I would, because you don't just fight for land. You fight for meaning, for memory, for legacy. She nodded and the camera light blinked off. Later that week, I walked the property line one more time. Just me and Rascal, the grass soft under my boots, the wind moving through the trees like an old friend whispering, "Well done." I stopped at the edge of the fence where it met the garden. There, hanging on the wire, was a wooden sign someone carved and hung without asking. It read, "Here stood a man who said no." And because of that, we all got to say yes. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from pain, but from something deeper, peace. That night, I lit a fire in the cabin stove, warmed up leftover chili, and pulled out an old photo album. There was one picture of my dad and me sitting right on this porch, him holding a mug just like I was now. I held the photo close. I kept it safe. "Pop," I whispered. I really did. Rascal barked once softly like he knew. And in that quiet room, surrounded by memories and flickering firelight, I realized something simple and powerful. When you stand for what's right, even when no one claps, even when it costs everything, you win, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after. And as the flames danced and the lake wind sang through the chimney, I leaned back in my chair and finally let go.